The women who raised us weren't trying to mess us up. They were just passing down the only relationship with food that, well, maybe they had ever known. So today's episode is going to be about making sure that we are the generation who stops that handover, that we break the cycle. So I have invited one of my besties onto the show to have a bit of a chat. That is going to be clinical psychologist Dr. Chelsea Arnold, and we're chatting about how to model our relationship with food in our bodies to the young people in our lives. And I don't just mean your kids. I mean other kids too, right? Your nieces, your students, teenagers who might be watching you at Christmas dinner, even out in the public, okay? So if you've ever caught yourself saying things like, oh shit, I've been so bad today in front of a young person, or maybe you've been praising one of those young people for losing weight, or maybe picking apart your own body in the mirror while someone little was watching you, then this one's for you. We've started to talk about this on the show before and it was super popular. So I have invited Chelsea and she's going to break down 4 specific things to avoid and why each one matters way more than we think. Make sure you stay till the end as well, because Chelsea is actually going to share what to do when you slip up. Because the reality is we all slip up. None of us are perfect. And that's actually okay. So make sure you stick to the end because I think that bit alone is really worth your time. Let's get into it. Hey gals, welcome back to Binge Free Bestie, the podcast where we ditch diets, break free from binge and emotional eating, and finally make peace with food and our bodies. I'm your host, Nick Garbedia. I'm a registered therapist who's been there herself. Binge eating, body shame, the whole exhausting cycle. I know it inside out. But here's the good news. Food freedom is totally possible, and my food freedom method is how you will get there. Every week on the potty, I'm going to be sharing real evidence-based tools from my therapy practice and my own recovery to help you to break up with binge and emotional eating and build a calmer, more empowered relationship with food. So, if you're done with the diet cycle and you're ready to reclaim your energy, your confidence, and your life, then you're in the right place. Hey besties, welcome back to the potty. I am super excited for today's episode because I have one of my besties back on the podcast. Chelsea, is this your second time on the show, right? Or is it your third?
I think it is, yeah. Second time. It's been too long.
It has. I think it's been it was about last June or July-ish that we caught up. But this is Dr. Chelsea Arnold. She's a clin psych from Australia. And last time we were talking about tracking and monitoring and how that's not helpful for those of us with disordered relationships with food. And very recently, I did an episode myself on, what it's like growing up around diet culture, or maybe a mum who struggled with food and eating in her body, and how that was for me and how that influenced, my future relationship with food and my body as an adult. And I gave a few strategies on what I think would be helpful. However, I'm not a mum. I'm not an expert in raising children. And despite that, people found the episode really helpful. If you guys want to listen to it, it is, what episode was it? Episode 62, if you want to go back and check it out. But we've got Chelsea here today because she really is an expert in this topic, and she has recently put out an article about how we can model good eating and body image habits to the young people in our lives. And we just thought it would be a great idea for Chelsea to come on and take us a little bit deeper into this topic and give us some more strategies.
Thanks, Nick. I am a clinical psychologist that has a special interest in eating disorders, and I am a mum, but I certainly don't want to put myself out as an expert parenting.
An expert mum.
Kind of winging it in that regard, but let's get into it and have a discussion about a few of the things that I think are helpful.
Well, maybe before we move into that, how can we model a healthy relationship with food and with our bodies for the young people in our lives? And it doesn't just have to be your own children. I mean, there's young people, maybe you work with young people. I used to be a youth worker and, we are role models for those rangatahi or young people. Maybe you have your own kids, maybe you're an auntie, maybe you're a nana. So lots of different ways and lots of young people in our lives who are watching us.
So I wonder, first of all, though, how do you see this show up in the lives of women that you work with? Do you see it as a common thread that some or most of the women you support kind of start learning this stuff really young from the women who were around them?
Yeah, definitely. So I think obviously, if we think about our relationship with our bodies and food, there's not one influence that's going to be like a causal factor that determines if we're going to have a struggle later in life. But certainly, a common thread that we would see is the relationship with food that people in the young person's life have. Awful stories that come to mind about young people being weighed daily from a very young age. All your listeners are probably familiar with the perils of diet culture around millennials growing up. So I think that's definitely a strong influential factor. And I think for today's generation of kids, we're seeing a resurgence. We're kind of in the Ozempic era. Bodies are getting very small. It's shifting rapidly, but I think there's a cultural shift where we should be mindful about the influences that we're kind of inherently giving to our kids.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, we can have lots of empathy for our mums and the women who came before them because they got the same messaging. Maybe it was like diet culture in a different outfit or slightly different beauty standards, slightly different body standards than maybe we had. But the thing is, they've still picked it up somewhere along the way and most likely thought that they were doing their best by us. I mean, a lot of the women I support or myself, my own story was a lot of pressure because they just wanted me to be healthy or they just wanted me to fit in or they didn't want me to be bullied. So, let's try to shift a little bit of that baby fat, those kind of things. Most of the time it comes from, good intentions or a good space. However, sometimes we just didn't realize or they didn't realize that it ended up being a little bit harmful or unhelpful along the way. So we're aware of this now. And many of us are either mums or coming into being mums, or as I said, have lots of young people around us. And we have the advantage of being a generation who really focus on healing and self-development. And we're super self-aware, which is great.
Following on from that comment, Nick, that if you are kind of listening to this and you feel like, oh, I haven't been doing that, and you're somebody that struggles with your own relationship with your body or eating, like you're saying with our mums or the previous generations, we can hold a lot of compassion for the reasons why these things might be quite difficult to do. And none of us get it right. And, parenting is all about not doing things perfectly and just doing our best.
Yeah. So let's talk about maybe starting off with some things you might suggest we can do to avoid causing any of that harm or the things that we picked up. What would be, I think you said you've got 4 kind of main tips that you like to share. What would be the first thing that you would suggest we avoid doing?
The first thing I would say to avoid, if possible, is really framing foods as good or bad. Kind of notice this in our everyday conversations that healthier foods are framed as like moralistic and good, and we feel like we're doing a good job of we're eating those foods. And then if we eat something that is bad, maybe something that people might categorize as junk food, then we say like we've been bad for eating that. So we really want to aim to move away from this moralistic view of food with our children. And instead of saying, oh, that food's healthy or that food is bad for you, which can really kind of perpetuate shame and guilt, particularly in teenagers and later kind of adolescents, about what we're eating. No food, I'm sure your listeners and yourself are well aware of this, but no food is good or bad. And instead, if you want to talk about things with your kids, you might say, oh, that food is really nourishing for our bodies. That food makes us really strong. You can talk about the function. And then if you're talking about something that maybe is less nutritious, in intuitive eating approaches, they would call that play food with children. You might talk about how that food is really pleasurable to eat. So that's really fun for us to eat. I like to say to my daughter, this food doesn't really nourish us, but it tastes really yummy. So we're acknowledging that there is different functions of food, and it doesn't mean one is good or bad.
I love that. Love that, because every food can have a place in our diet. They're absolutely, like, you deserve to have your cake and eat it. Does the cake, like you said, nourish my body? Not particularly. Does it nourish my soul? Yes. I want to go, to the party. And I don't want to just say, oh, I'll just have a sliver of that cake, less. Like, I know my mum used to do that all the time, was if she had the cake, it was always such a big thing. There's such a big deal of like, oh, okay, I'll have it, but just give me a tiny sliver. And then she'd eat it and be like, I'm so bad. I'm terrible for eating this. No breakfast tomorrow. Tomorrow we need to go for a walk up the hill after eating this. And language is so powerful. And I think that's what you're saying as well, right? Is we moralize food. It's not our fault that we've come to that space. We've learned that through years and years of messaging about food, Weight Watchers, things that we read in Women's Health magazine, events, things that we learned at school about good food, bad food, naughty, nice, clean, junk, like you said. But we can still have it. It's not going to throw off health and wellbeing goals if you do have it. If anything, what have we learned from experience and from working with women is that if you don't let yourself have the cake, if you continue to label it as bad or naughty and have it up on this pedestal, when you do have it, we can have that loss of control, that guilt, that shame spiral, binge episode. So let yourself have the food, enjoy the food in front of your kids, in front of young people, and show them it's okay to have the cake.
Yeah, definitely. You basically just took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, in addition to how we talk about the food, and I know for some of us that struggle with our own eating and relationships with our bodies, this can be a challenge, but as much as possible, do try to have a non-restrictive approach to those foods that we might struggle with, whether it's cake or chocolate. Because the more we restrict, the more we kind of moralize those foods. And actually, we would say, like, if we restrict a child or anybody, as we know, from having a food, we just end up wanting it more. So all foods ideally are on the table. No foods are good or bad, and we can enjoy foods, in a casual and flexible way as much as possible.
And I know a lot of women will hear you saying that, and that might feel a bit scary because they'll say, okay, so you're saying I can have the cake, but I can't be eating cake every day. Like, that's ridiculous. I'm going to gain weight. How can I possibly allow that or allow my kids to do that? But like you just said, I guess what would you say to a woman who feels afraid about allowing all foods in her diet and, that little whisper in the back of her head about, well, I won't be able to control myself. I'll overeat on them if they're available to me. I'll regain the weight or I'll put weight on. Like, what would you say to those women?
Look, I think it's really individual. And I guess as I'm talking through these points, these are maybe like our North Stars or things that we want to be aiming for, and validating that if you are struggling with your own relationship with food, these can be points where maybe we need to get a little bit of extra support. Like, if that feels completely daunting, the thought of having food at the table, it could be a sign, not for everybody, but it could be a sign that maybe we need to do a bit of work on ourselves first. And sometimes having our children and wanting to set them up in the best way possible can be a very strong motivating factor for us. So I would say baby steps. If the things that we're talking about feel like way out of reach, I would say that could be a sign that maybe we need to do some of our individual work first. And holding in mind that our kids really pick up on implicit cues and things like that. I would, argue for a lot of us, it can be a worthwhile venture to do some of that individual work if that's feeling really overwhelming and scary.
Yeah, awesome advice. And I think as well, like sometimes that motivation to do the work for yourself, we're just not quite there yet. We've got lots of reasons as to why we're not ready, why we don't want to invest, why this is going to be too hard. And sometimes it's, having a kid or having young people around you, if that's a motivator, awesome. Sometimes we need someone else to hold the mirror up for us and be like, actually, I need to do some work. And if that's going to motivate you to do that self-development work, then use it. Use the motivation.
When you have your own child, it really holds up a mirror to your own issues a bit. So, maybe you thought your food was going quite well. And then when you're trying to, feed a little person or a child or anything like that, you might kind of notice that some things that maybe you hadn't noticed before are still kind of bubbling away, and can be a good signal that maybe we need to interrogate that or work on that, whether that be independently or with some professional support as well.
Yeah. And I mean, both options are there. Like you can go really far in doing this work on your own for sure. Like there's so many amazing resources out there that you can access. You've got this podcast, there's lots of amazing books. Chelsea, you've written lots of articles that are freely available online. Like you can start to chip away at this on your own, but I think it's also really valuable to have someone on your team, someone by your side, or a bit of a community as well. I mean, peer support is amazing too. So definitely reach out if you do need that and you're ready and you're willing to do the work. So that was the tip one, was on just checking in if we're framing foods as good or bad, or kind of the language that we're using around food, the way we're categorizing it. That's a really awesome tip. And then what would be your second thing that we might try to avoid or try to work on?
So the second thing, and I think this is particularly relevant in our current social climate, as I was kind of alluding to before, we're kind of in this weight loss medication era. There's lots of chatter online. Everywhere you go, there's talk about weight loss. And I think I've just noticed that personally over recent months, this resurgence of weight loss talk on the background of that. But something we want to kind of model to our children is avoiding commenting on other people's bodies. If you're a millennial girl like us, you probably have been exposed to growing up with lots of compliments about weight loss, comments about other people's bodies, whether that's a family member or a stranger or celebrities. We're seeing a huge resurgence of commentary on celebrities' bodies. The reason we want to kind of avoid that is it teaches our children and kids to kind of compare and judge themselves against other people. But also I think it ties up people's kind of, when we comment on weight loss and things like that, it kind of equates worth with our appearance.
Yes.
We want to basically avoid commenting on other people's bodies. Now, we're all human, so we might notice that somebody has lost weight, or we might notice that somebody looks different from last time we saw them. I guess my perspective would be, particularly around our children, even though it's commonplace in society to make comments and praise people for weight loss and things like that, we would want to be refraining from commenting on other people's bodies in general. If you have a smaller baby or a smaller kid, and toddlers just like to blurt out what's on their mind, if you have a child that comments on somebody else's physical appearance, maybe that person says that person's fat, or that person's in a wheelchair, or something like that maybe as adults we wouldn't feel it's very polite to kind of say. I would advise the kind of parent to say something like, everybody's different, all bodies are different, and just be highlighting that, some people are taller, some people are shorter. We have larger bodies, smaller bodies, different skin color, different strengths, weaknesses, and really modeling to our children that we can celebrate people of all shapes, all sizes, all skin colors, and that our appearance and our weight is not how we measure worthy.
Quick pause here, besties, because I want to share with you a free resource that might really, really help you. So if you're struggling with overeating, binges, emotional eating, or maybe food just feels like it has a little bit too much power over you, then I have created a free guide. It's called the Emotional Eater's Fix. So inside this guide, I'm breaking down some of the real reasons why this pattern has been happening. And I'm going to walk you through a few simple tools that you can start using straight away to shift your relationship with food and your body. It's totally free. You can just grab it through the link in the show notes. All right, let's jump back into the episode. I have a curly one for you though, like a curly question. As you mentioned Ozempic, right? And we can see, and as you said, there's a lot more commentary right now on celebrity bodies. And a lot of that is because they are using those tools, they're using that medication, and some of them are rapidly losing a lot of weight, and the commentary is around like, oh, this isn't right. What about our young people witnessing this? She doesn't look healthy. There's something seriously wrong. And I did an episode on the commentary around Kelly Osbourne. If you saw her kind of in the news the last few months around, the loss of her dad, the huge shifts and the way that she looked physically, and so much commentary of people really, really coming for her, saying she's a poor role model. How can she put herself out there when she's clearly got XYZ conditions, or she's using these meds? I mean, lots of assumptions being made. I guess my take on that was that it's never okay to talk about anybody else's body ever in any context, even if we are concerned, because most of the time, hopefully someone like, for example, Kelly Osbourne will have access to resources and a team, and she's also outwardly said that. However, the curly question would be, if we have young people, especially say teenagers, and they are being privy to seeing celebrities on the red carpet right now. I mean, I saw at the Met, like Demi Moore, there was a lot of conversation around her looking strong and toned, and then other people being like, no way, she's looking extremely unwell, and a lot of fighting. I mean, where do we stand? Because what would be your advice around, okay, it's not okay to comment on anybody's body ever, your shape and size don't equate to your worth. What would be your advice for the people who are saying, but I'm just commenting because I'm concerned about their health, or I'm concerned that they're a poor role model, or they're not well and they need help? I mean, what do we do in those circumstances, especially say if we're having conversations with teenagers who may be looking at this kind of stuff online?
It's really difficult to know. And at the same time, a concern that I would have at the moment is that we're exposed to celebrities who are very thin. And I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist, but my understanding is that commenting that Demi Moore is toned when she's clearly extremely thin, to the extent that we might be concerned about being that thin has a lot of health consequences. I wonder if there is a space within the family unit to provide a buffer against that.
Because if you have an older child, that does create the opportunity to have these more nuanced conversations, like the ones we're having, like, hey, this is a great time to talk about and maybe touch on body standards and diet culture and why celebrities are using these tools like Ozempic or cosmetic surgeries, and hey, how's that making you feel when you see that kind of stuff, and just using it as a chance to like gently explore it, maybe going down that road.
That sounds like a wonderful thing, yeah, because I think in my mind just then I was trying to come up with some kind of golden nugget explanation, but there isn't one, right? And we don't know what's going on for individuals. But if you do have a child, like a teenager, who is open or has capacity for more of those nuanced conversations, I think it's a great kind of way to go, just to have that conversation about it.
Yeah, it's really giving them the tools of critical thinking, isn't it? And feeling safe to be able to come to you and talk about those kind of topics and know that, hey, this is a judgment-free space, no shame. And we're not talking about this other woman's body from a place of judging her or critiquing her. We're just curious about how does it make you feel and bringing it back to you and your family unit and your experiences rather than making assumptions about someone else's body and health and well-being. So just taking it off that individual person and talking about the wider cultural implications maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we think about teenagers, peers and media are going to be a stronger influence on teenagers than they are on, say, like my young toddler, obviously. And I think this is where how we show up in the family unit with regards to what we model with regards to our food and our bodies can be that buffer against these really quite relentless messages.
Mm. So I know for sure, like when I think back about growing up, so I was born in the early 90s. So I remember seeing stuff like, do you remember like all the magazines were really like hounding, for example, like Jessica Simpson and calling her huge and she's this and she's that, and J-Lo, it looks like this and that. So those were like the celebrities of our time. But I remember that. Even now, I remember specific celebrities who were really, really hounded. So like our young girls now, or our young people, are going to remember these pop culture moments that for us now as adults, maybe they're just, it's a revolving door of these moments, but they might stick for them. They may be looking up to these people and they may be taking meaning from it. So yeah, I think creating a safe space at home, like you said, role modeling through our own relationship with food and eating in our bodies is the most powerful thing that we can do, really.
Yeah, exactly. Because we obviously have limited control over social media influencers. We have limited control over the press and things like that. It's interesting that you kind of bring up Jessica Simpson because I remember then there was like a period where she lost a lot of weight and it was all over the tabloids about her being too skinny. So it's very difficult.
Awful for these women because like a lot of this commentary we're seeing at the moment, and bringing it back to Kelly Osbourne again, is it's like they are public figures. This is irresponsible. How dare they? But it's like a lot of these people live a completely different life to us, being under public scrutiny constantly. And Kelly Osbourne, her entire life, same with Jessica Simpson, since she was a young woman in a body that was commodified, sexualized, she made her money from her body and the way that she looks. So imagine the pressure and the constant scrutiny. So I feel for them that they have had to live under that microscope their whole life. Like, yes, it's a golden cage. But, I think we still need to look at them as human and individual people who are probably really struggling. And I just don't think it's okay to comment on anybody's body ever, celebrity or not.
I think also, I'm probably digressing a little bit from the focus and we can get back on track in a second. But,
we digress.
If somebody's in the public eye, that it's okay to comment on them because they're famous.
Yes,
And
I hear
I just
that a
think
lot.
coming back to what we were talking about at the top of this episode, I think we can really hold a lot of compassion for why women in the public eye might feel that they need to be in a smaller body or might turn towards quite drastic measures to be smaller because the pressure is really unrelenting.
Yeah, exactly. And if we normalize it and make it okay to talk about their bodies, why should it be any different for other people to comment about ours? So let's just start from the top. If you're putting them at the top of society, which we're not, but it's just, if it's okay for us to talk about them, then it makes it okay for other people to talk about us. And one thing I talked about in that past episode was it's really kind of patriarchy doing its magic work. It's pitting women against one another, and we all need to support one another if we're ever going to dismantle diet culture, which is at its core patriarchy. And I know this sounds super, super feminist, but that's what it is if we want to have kind, loving relationships with our bodies and we want to have calm and confidence and freedom with food, it starts with these little things like not commenting on any other women's bodies. And then I think critiquing our own bodies, right? So how we talk about our own bodies in front of young people, it could be a good pivot there.
Yeah. So I think, and this is where, we want to hold a lot of compassion if you are somebody that struggles with your own body image, that this one might be quite challenging. But really, as we're kind of the kind of narrative thread throughout all of these points is that what we do, the little things that we do in the home matter in setting up our child's relationship with their body and food. And so research is really clear that if we hear, say, our parents or other people in our life criticize their bodies, it really engages children to have more negative self-talk about their own bodies, right? Like we model what we see. I think that makes total sense. So we really want to, as much as possible, avoid criticizing our own bodies, kind of socially accepted to talk negatively about our own bodies, but as much as possible, and kind of validating that might be a struggle if your internal kind of critic is quite negative about your own body, but certainly being mindful about what we say in front of children because the research is really clear on that. If we want to talk about an alternative, particularly with younger children who are starting to, grasp language and develop these kind of concepts, is thinking less about appearance about bodies and focusing on functions of bodies. So might say like, oh, your legs are so strong, they help you walk, something like that, rather than, the kind of quintessential example growing up would be like, oh, my thighs are fat, or does my bum look big in this, or my bum looks so big in this, those negative self-talks about our own figures. I think that can be a challenge if we're somebody that struggles with our own body image. And again, coming back to what we were talking about before, might be an indicator that we need to do some of that own internal work as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you said before as well, like we don't need to be perfect. We just need to be trying. So that might mean that sometimes we slip up and we may say something about our bodies. Maybe you didn't know that that young person was around you. Or maybe, it's just a bit of a slip of the tongue. Say, gosh, I look awful today. Just say that happens. What would be your advice for like in the moment repair, or like how would you reframe it, or what would you do to kind of, okay, I said this, now what?
I think acknowledging what we've done is always, typically the best way forward, and be like, oh, you know what? It depends so I've got a 2-year-old, so I'm kind of talking in the way that I'd be talking to a toddler, but obviously you're going to tailor your language and the discussions to what's appropriate for your child. But I might say something like, oh, mummy made a mistake then. Mummy was talking about this. Actually, we shouldn't talk about our bodies that way. I'm noticing this. I think kind of just acknowledging and then repairing in the moment can be really helpful. Another thing, for example, I'm trying to model intuitive eating to my child. And, one of the kind of key factors of that is trusting your child to take what they need. And even as somebody that, has quite a bit of knowledge in this space and is really aware about what to do and what not to do, like I've read the book and, this is my area of work, I still, of course, slip up from time to time. And I think just holding compassion for ourselves that we don't need to get it right all the time. One little slip up is not going to set the scene. It's about how we show up on a day-to-day basis, really going for good enough with these things rather than perfection, which is another thing that can be really difficult for a lot of us. Want to get everything right.
Absolutely. And I mean, what we know about most people who struggle with disordered eating is that like a shared trait is that we're perfectionists and we're high achievers. So we want to be super mums probably. And I know that I will be that way. But Yeah, I think that's really nice to have that permission slip that, okay, I'm going to try my best. I'm going to role model. I'm going to actively be working on myself and my own stuff in the background. And if I slip up, which may happen, I'm only human, going to have A, lots of self compassion, and B, I'm going to repair in the moment. And that's a cool thing as well to role model, is to show your young person, like, okay, whoops, I didn't mean to say that. Or, you know what? I don't mean that. That was like, I don't know. I need to practice this myself. But, role modeling to them what repair looks like in the moment would be a really powerful thing to gift to them as well.
You can also repair after the fact as well, because
Yes.
sometimes whether we're dysregulated or we are acting on instinct and not thinking about it, we don't always kind of get our slip-ups in the moment. But if you notice something that is, maybe a bit significant, you can always come back to it later. Or, let one slide. It's fine. It can go through to the goalpost. Like, it doesn't really matter about these tiny moments. I think what matters when we're raising kids and thinking about these things is the big picture and the patterns over time.
Yeah. And if you notice a pattern in yourself, again, like, that's a good opportunity to be like, okay, give it up a bit of data here that shows that maybe there's a bit of an issue with, like, body image or my relationship with food. And so therefore I'm going to go ask for some help. I'm going to work on this. Yeah. Okay, cool. So far we've been talking about things to avoid. We've talked about how we frame food, so the language that we're using, the moralization of food. We've talked about commenting on other people's bodies, and we've also talked about how we talk about our own bodies. And then the final thing that we were going to touch on is something that parents or moms or just people who have young people in their life, what would be your final kind of thing that you would suggest to avoid?
Making compliments based on our appearance. So we touched on this before. You might hear people say, "Oh, you're such a pretty girl," or
Yeah.
"You look so pretty." It's just something that comes to mind. And I think that for children and teenagers who are developing, that really, again, is kind of equating worth with how we look. I think society is going to push us in that direction already. So
Yes.
as an alternative, what I would try to think is thinking about how can we acknowledge the strengths and fabulous attributes of our child on things that aren't related to their weight, their appearance, or how much they've eaten, rather than saying, "Oh, you're such a good eater." We might want to say, "I love how hard you worked on that project," or "I really loved that thing that you did," or this other non-physical attribute. I guess that kind of ties in with what we were talking before, but I think it's just another small reminder of things that we can focus on in the home that aren't physical.
Absolutely. I think there's some really powerful strategies in there that we can start applying. And I know I'm definitely going to park this in the back of my head for when the time comes. Shouldn't be too far down the track, but that is super helpful. And so, Chelsea, if anyone wanted to connect with you or the work that you do in the community, do you want to give us a wee rundown of what you get up to and how they can learn more?
Yeah, sure. If you were interested in some of the points that we've spoken about today, I did just publish an article how to kind of model these habits so you can read a little bit more. You can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Chelsea Arnold. You can also download my free app, which is the Birdie app from the App Store or Google Play if you're somebody that does struggle with binge eating more specifically.
Yes. And I will put in the show notes, so the link to your article, your Insta, and then also the link for Bertie and the prior episode that we did together, because that really goes deep into the value of what you've created there, which is a really safe space. So the app essentially is where you can monitor your food and eating in a safe way, right? Without tracking calories and macros and any of that kind of pressure. As we were saying, to be good or bad, or I've been bad. It's not about policing or punishing the self. It's about gathering up that data so we can make our next best choice for ourselves.
Yeah, we've got different tools on there as well. And there's also a community forum. So, we can
Yes.
dive into other issues like this in more detail if you wanted to.
Yes, and I recommend the Bertie app in my program, the Breakup, as well, as a way for you to start gathering up that data about, okay, well, where am I at right now? What's my current relationship with food and eating look like? And as I said, then you get kind of a baseline and you've got something to work with and set some goals around. And it's just about building awareness, as I said, so that you can start to think about, well, what's next for me? What are my health and well-being goals? And what's the kind of data that supports that? So it's a really cool space, and I've got lots of compliments from my gals about the Bertie app. So really love that you've got it out there, and it's for free right now. Right now. I think it's super valuable, powerful tool that we, have created that for the community. And it's global, right? Like women from anywhere around the world can use it.
Yep. It's just on the App Store and Google Play Store for free. So if you're somebody that struggles with, we've kind of designed it for binge eating, but it's for people that struggle with related issues more generally. You can download it, check it out, and see if it's helpful. Another tool to put in the tool belt.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming back and doing another episode with me. We'll have to do another one because you are just got a gold mine of super interesting, helpful tools and strategies for us all. So I'm going to have you back when you're able.
That would be an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Nick.
No worries. I'll catch you again next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right, besties, that's a wrap for today. If you want to go deeper, check out the links in my show notes. You're going to find free resources, ways we can work together, and more details on my signature program, The Breakup. This is your roadmap to help you to break free from binge and emotional eating for good. If this episode has helped you, please hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're feeling extra kind, leaving a quick review really helps this podcast to reach more women who need it. Take care of your beautiful self, bestie, and I'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.